1,000 men more than 70 questions about their families, faith, marriages, parenting, and careers. That research gave me a pretty good handle on the issues men were dealing with. Several individuals who knew of my research suggested that I write a book on how men could become spiritual leaders of their families. That seemed like a pipe dream to me. But the Lord opened up some contacts with various Christian publishers. Their response were pretty much the same. We don't publish books for men. Christian men don't read, and they don't walk into Christian bookstores. We've done our research, and books to men don't work. On the other hand, I hasten to add that a few publishers wanted to see that turned around. John Van Diest, Ron Land, Joey Paul, and Bruce Nygren all worked for different publishing companies. Yet they were all very encouraging to me at a time when publishers didn't do books to men. Finally, through a remarkable series of events, John Van Diest of Multnomah Press took the risk and invited me to publish Point Man. I began to work on the manuscript in the spare upstairs bedroom. I had never been published before. Days of inspiration, when the words would come fast and furious, would be followed by days when I was stuck. I now look back on the stuck days with great fondness. On those days I had to get out of the rut. So on numerous occasions, here is what I would do to motivate myself. I would ask God if He would use this book to reach at least 100,000 men. That was a bold prayer for someone who had never written before. And remember, this was 1989, and publishers didn't do books for men. To ask God to put this book into the hands of 100,000 men was quite a stretch. In fact, it bordered on the absurd. It was so absurd I never shared that prayer request with anyone else. I just kept it between me and the Lord. So, where did I come up with 100,000? Very simple. I knew what 100,000 people looked like because on New Year's Day in 1966, I was sitting with my dad and two brothers in the Rose Bowl, watching UCLA and Michigan State battle it out. I prayed for 100,000 men to read Point Man because I could remember what it was like to be in a football stadium with that many people. Beyond that, my thinking went like this. I imagined how I'd respond if someone were to call me up and say, "Steve, we have a football stadium full of men who want to be spiritual leaders of their families. Would you come out and speak to them?" This was the most outlandish idea that I could ever imagine, something that could never happen. But I knew I would do it if the call ever came. Now again, remember, this was 1989. Promise Keepers didn't exist. It would be 3 or 4 more years before a group of Christian men would fill up a football stadium. But to keep myself motivated, I would imagine what it would be like to speak at a packed-out stadium full of men. That prospect would be very motivating. But because it could never possibly happen, I said to myself, the next best thing would be if the Lord could get this book into the hands of that many men. If I played that scenario through in my mind once, I played it through 20 times while I was writing Point Man. I'm convinced that the Lord has a great sense of humor, aren't you? Because as I sat in that upstairs bedroom and stared at my Apple Macintosh, little did I know that God actually intended for this book to reach far more than 100,000 men. And never in my wildest dreams would I have believed that through the ministry of a Promise Keepers organization that didn't even exist yet, I would soon have the privilege, on numerous occasions, of speaking in football stadiums full of men. I could see none of that in 1989, yet I can look back 13 years later and see how God wove it all together, and it is a thrilling thing to contemplate. From time to time, someone still comes up to me and tells me how much Point Man has meant to them personally. I would be lying if I said that wasn't a gratifying experience, but it has to be kept in perspective. The late Dr. Edwin Lewis Cole used to tell a great story. Dr. Cole would speak of that momentous day when the Lord Jesus entered Jerusalem riding on an ass. The crowds were massive, and the people were waving palm branches and crying out, "Hosanna! Hosanna!" Wouldn't it be something, Dr. Cole said, if that donkey thought all that applause was for him? Steve Farrar, November 2002. Chapter 1. Point Man on Patrol. It is harder to lead a family than to rule a nation. Chinese proverb. Albert Einstein was invited to speak at a banquet held in his honor at Swarthmore College. Hundreds of people from all over the country crowded an auditorium to hear what he had to say. When it came time for him to speak, the great physicist walked to the lectern, solemnly looked around, and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I am very sorry."